Weird sciencey facts that boggle my mind. Holocausts are not always a bad thing. I mean, the one you're thinking of, that one was bad. Very bad, every conceivable way. Nothing good about that one. But we owe our existence to the very first ever Holocaust. However, the same people who deny the one you're thinking of would probably deny this one as well, because it happened about 2.5 billion years ago. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. But it was a very different place a few billion years ago than it is today. And probably the biggest difference is something we all take for granted. The air we breathe, as in there wasn't any, at least none with oxygen in it. And this is because oxygen has abandonment issues. And much like that first marriage, oxygen would much rather be in a toxic relationship than be by itself. So oxygen is the reason that your car rusts. It's the reason that things burn. It's the reason that water is everywhere. Oxygen has lower standards on who it'll hook up with than a drunk frat boy at last call. And as a result, Earth's early atmosphere consisted almost exclusively of methane, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. And this meant a few things. All of those things are greenhouse gases, methane being even more powerful a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And this meant that the world was hot everywhere. And there was nothing blocking the sun's UV rays, so the sun constantly sterilized the Earth's surface. And this meant that when life started 3.7 billion years ago, they were just single-celled organisms that had to live in the ocean or in the rocks. They were anaerobic and mainly subsisted off of minerals. And for over 1 billion years, that was the status quo. But about 2.5 billion years ago, cyanobacteria showed up like a Donnie Wahlberg boy band. And this new bacteria on the block said, let's try this again, and step by step they came up with some new dirty dancing moves until they figured out photosynthesis and said, you got it. Sorry, that was bad, don't unfollow me. Anyway, cyanobacteria figured out how to use water as a fuel source for oxidation and get energy from sunlight, and the result was that they crapped oxygen. And for a couple 100 million years, this went just fine. Like that first college party after all the freshmen show up, there was lots of other single atoms running around for all this oxygen to hook up with. But fast forward a couple 100 million years, and now oxygen's sitting there in its mid-20s looking at its Facebook feed and starts to realize that all the other atoms have married up, settled down, having kids. So now there's just a bunch of free oxygen floating around, oxygenating the ocean. And pretty soon the pool party got really crowded and the oxygen started moving out into the atmosphere. Out here, the oxygen starts hooking up with methane. Basically, all the methane disappears from the atmosphere and it becomes primarily oxygen and nitrogen. Once again, all this free oxygen has no one to ask to the dance. So then the sun starts reacting with the oxygen, and when that happens, it creates ozone. And ozone is like SPF 1000. That is the Earth's sunblock. But now there's a problem. Every living organism thus far has evolved to live in a world that didn't have oxygen. So free oxygen is poisonous to basically everything. Like Luke Wilson waking up in the future, the cyanobacteria had covered the entire planet in its own waste, and stuff started dying. And to make matters worse, all of this oxygen had basically ripped the blanket off of Earth's atmosphere, and Earth got cold, really cold. It was likely our first ice age. And once again, the Earth had been really hot up to this point, and everything had evolved to deal with those temperatures, so the Ice Age killed a lot more stuff. And this is what's known as the oxygen holocaust, or the Great Oxidation Event. And it likely wiped out nearly all life on Earth, but not all. And in the words of Mark Goldblum, life finds a way. And this way happened to be metabolism. Some organisms quickly evolved to start using oxygen to process their energy. And in doing so, they started to raise the amount of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere and eventually gave us a very similar air to what we have today. Now we had a really cool new way to efficiently metabolize our energy, and we had a shiny new sunscreen that allowed life to start evolving on land without being fried by UV rays. And we came up with a brand new system, a balancing act, where organisms that use photosynthesis for their energy give us the oxygen we need to process our own energy, and we in turn turn that oxygen back into carbon dioxide to keep them from dying in their own filth. And the fact that we only exist today because a few billion years ago some bacteria drowned the entire world in its own waste, well, that is pretty mind-boggling.